Joining us live now is Liberal MP for Victoria, Tim Wilson. Tim, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Firstly, one of your colleagues still under fire, Gladys Liu. Very brief statement from Matthias Cormann in the Senate. He could have taken 20 minutes. We got about 90 seconds and no real clarification on the discrepancies between her previous statements.
Well, what we've seen now is just a continuous effort by the Labor Party to run a smear campaign. Now, increasingly, things they're prepared to say inside the parliament, but not outside the parliament. And I think they've got to step up it, but it highlights, I think, for the Australian people very clearly what their strategy and their motive is. The Finance Minister, Annelise Nielsen, has made it quite clear that she's a patriotic Australian, and that's the expectation that we have of every member of Parliament.
Now, all eyes are on the Senate this morning. Senator Rex Patrick certainly mixed things up a bit with John Setka. Some accusations there of him bullying him and Nick Xenophon at Perth Airport, and also separately a referral to the AFP over what was leaked in those audio recordings. Do you think Labor's being strong enough on John Setka?
No. I mean, this is the scandal, really. If you look at where Labor's putting its resources and its focus around scrutiny at the moment, they have a union official who, with deep connections to the Labor Party, who's being accused of outrageous bullying behaviour, and they're focusing on a Liberal MP rather than squarely focusing on problems in their own ranks. Mr Setka has a lot to answer for in terms of his conduct over a whole range of issues, and the Labor Party, and particularly Anthony Albanese, has sort of been a bit awash when it comes to confronting it.
Anthony Albanese's been very clear, saying John Setka needs to go. But the thing is, it is
saying it, doing it. But
he can't do it. It's down to the Labor. It's the union in Victoria that has to decide to get rid of him, and they're backing him in.
We all know that the relationship between the trade union movement and the Australian Labor Party is one that's pretty ingratiated. If Anthony Albanese actually, if he has authority and he wants to exercise it, he can get rid of Setka. But he's basically talking the talk but not walking the walk. And this has now become a really deep character test, I think, for him and, frankly, for the integrity of the ALP itself, about what type of behaviour it's going to tolerate. And basically, at this point, they've said they're going to accept it, and every time there's another issue that comes along, they've tolerated it, and now I think we're getting to the point where a clear line's going to be drawn in the sand.
Now, the ACCC's also been in the headlines, which is within your remit.
It is.
The ACCC has reportedly asked Treasurer for an inquiry into banks and competition between the big four banks. Do you support that?
I'm waiting to see what the case is put forward by the ACCC. They've made the argument in the papers today, or at least flagged the possibility. We've got Rod Sims coming to present before the Economics Committee at 11, and I'm expecting a full clarity about why they think the case is there. We've obviously had the Hayne Royal Commission. We're implementing recommendations of the Royal Commission. There are concerns that people like me have around access to credit and competition, but to the extent of having a whole inquiry, I think they've got to put a compelling case.
Because that is the risk here. If you start putting pressure on the banks, they're going to just really close up on credit lines again, and then we have people not being able to borrow money.
Oh, and we're very mindful of it. That's why the government has taken a considered, proportionate response. I mean, you may recall the Labor Party, when the Royal Commission report, even before it was announced, they basically committed they were going to implement everything. We're taking a considered and proportionate approach in the implementation to make sure that we get it right, that we don't harm access to consumer credit for small business, for self-employed Australians, and for business so they can grow, invest and create jobs. But we also need a competitive market to make sure that smaller banks can compete against the big four.
When it comes to the ACCC, there has been some concern about their effectiveness as a regulator. They're fronting the committee tomorrow at your heading. What are you expecting them to say? What would you like to hear from them?
Well, what I want is confidence from the ACCC as well as the other regulators, which ASIC was under scrutiny last Friday, is confidence that they've learned lessons of the past and they're going to do their job diligently, but do it well. I think one of the concerns is that there's been, with some regulators in the past, focus on issues, but have they followed through in terms of implementation or expectations of delivery against it? And so that's where our focus will be.
From the regulator's perspective, they say a lot of that's down to lack of funding. Would you commit to more funding for the ACCC? Well,
we provided some extra funding for some of the agencies and regulators when there's a case and there's a demonstrable outcome associated with what they're trying to achieve. But it's not my position to commit to funding. What they've got to do is build the case about why they need to do what they need to do to affect competition in the marketplace.
And so what exactly do you want them to be giving evidence about tomorrow? What will you be hitting them on?
Well, they're actually coming to it before us today.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, ACCC. That's all right. Well, there are a number of issues. They're obviously, they've had a big discussion recently around digital platforms and their inquiry. I think there's going to be a lot of questions around that. But I think they've obviously decided to put competition in the banks at the forefront. I think they now need to answer very clearly why it is that they're putting that at the forefront and why they're raising it as an issue. The evidence base to stack it up. And of course, what impact that's going to have.
John Wilson, thank you for your time.
Thanks.